Oh, g'day, Rastus. How you going? Rastus. My grandpa used to say that. He used to always call dogs, any dog, Rastus. How you going, Rastus? Welcome back to Deep and Meaningfuls with Furzey. Thanks for being here. This is episode 8. If you want to get in touch, hit me up on Instagram at @themarkfurs. And if you dig the pod, just share it with your mates. Share it around. Maybe they'll like it. Maybe they'll hate it. Who knows? You can blame me. Right. Well, there are 3 things that I love in life. The Matrix, a ripe passion fruit, and a good deep chat. And I think that this might actually be the deepest D&Ms with Furzey yet. I kind of knew it would be. It's inevitable with my guest on this episode. His name's Olly Green, or the OG. We met around 10 years ago in New Zealand in the music scene. He is now currently studying psychotherapy, and he will be a wonderful psychotherapist. Man, this guy, he's an absolute soul searcher. He went backpacking in Nepal on his own for months. Courageous. He loves it. He's a deeply thoughtful and introspective guy, and he just oozes authenticity, just oozes it. So, here is Olly Green. All right, are you recording?
Yes.
Great. So am I. It looks like we're doing it.
Yeah, here we go.
It was when I did my podcast with Jimos.
Yes.
We just started like this.
Yes.
And I just started talking, and then he goes, afterwards, I sent it to him just so he could have a listen, and he goes, "Oh, you didn't, well, listen to the one you did with Stefan, and you said all this nice stuff about him at the start. You didn't do that with me." And I went, "Yeah, bro, I don't record that at the same time."
Fuck. That's your comment, eh? That's your feedback. Like, you didn't jerk me off, bro, but you jerked him off. Come on, bro.
Yeah, I was like, I do that afterwards. I don't do that in front of you.
Fuck. That's hilarious. That's when you know you're good friends with someone, because if he wasn't that comfortable, he'd just be like, what a dick. He wouldn't bring it. He wouldn't give you a chance to explain.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So that was nice. That was nice. And I think that a lot of people actually, I guess I'm the same. When I first started listening to podcasts, I didn't realize that they didn't do the intro with them sitting there waiting. Because, when you watch like the morning show and they've got a guest, they'll do the intro and then they just pan across and they're right there. Yeah. So I guess maybe that's why people think.
Do they record those? They record them in a linear fashion, eh? Like the Froze, they do them before.
I reckon they do, especially if it's those live morning shows. Those ones are, they're just get in there. They've got to create content that's going to be entertaining and really hard-hitting in the first, they get 4 minutes. Whereas in podcast world, you just shoot the shit for hours and hours and hopefully something entertaining comes out of it or informative.
Different formats, eh? And one perhaps more growing in popularity than the other for those reasons.
Absolutely. I think that's certainly why I started doing one, because I was like, it's transparent. I wanted the element of nuance. I wanted to be able to explore an idea. You can't understand something complex in 4 minutes with an expert standing in front of sitting on a panel show that you just can't understand it. So you can't, and they don't explore it. The hosts and the people talking to, like, I've done a couple of those things, like morning shows and that kind of stuff. And it's weird, man. You sit there and you it's all a whirlwind. They put you in makeup and you don't know what they're going to ask. And then you sit down and everyone's like, they go, "Hi, how are you?" And then we're rolling in like 10 seconds and you go, "Okay, let's go." And then they're just happening and you're just sitting there and you just kind of try and come up with something witty and profound on the spot. And then 2 minutes later, it's done.
Yeah, it's a real performance art, isn't it? TV appearances.
Absolutely.
To really get across the brand, because you're not really a person when you're on TV. You're a brand, and to sell whatever you're there to sell. Assuming you're there to sell. I'm assuming you're on TV to sell something. I mean, yeah,
it is a skill. It's a skill that no one is really taught. Well, I mean, you can be taught it, but it's not something that I personally ever endeavoured to learn. I just kind of just got thrown in, and you just go with it.
I feel like, and when you say you don't know what the questions are, I have this thought of like, I kind of know what range the questions will probably be within, but I still feel anxious about the questions they will ask because perhaps because they're not real questions. Like I don't get a chance to really talk here. I just have to perform, you know?
Yeah. You're exactly right. You're exactly right. You can tell, you know what pocket the questions are going to sit in, and it's never going to be anything overly offensive or probing or groundbreaking. And the answers need to be relatively vanilla. The answers have to be equally as non-groundbreaking and vanilla, which can be an awkward situation to be in if you if you don't really feel that way. But it's a game. You got to play the game. You don't have to, but that's what you're there for.
Yeah.
And if you don't,
yeah, and I think we're talking about a medium that's been a key communication channel for how many years now? Like it's at least been key for like 60 years. And we're talking about how limiting it is in actually being able to represent anything in any depth, any realness, and yet it's been this huge channel of communication. So we've been taking in this content that's shallow for years now, and the format hasn't changed. They haven't done anything about that, because when you've got mass communication, you can't really be. You have to be vanilla. You're gonna, you can't be outlandish. You can't. It's got to please the audience.
Yeah, and I guess it is changing now. It's been the same for so long, whereas now there's podcasts everywhere and people having long form conversations everywhere.
Well, I mean, what if you had a TV interview and you just said randomly, "Oh, yeah, I'm interested in psychedelics." Imagine that moment. Like the host job would be to move forward from that interjection as quickly as possible or make
move
a joke
away.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, but here you are on a podcast and you can talk about these things that are important to you.
Dude, I've thought about that exact thing, and I probably won't. It would be a very interesting moment depending on the host, because I think that's one of the things like, oh no, that's taboo, we can't be going there. They'd have people in their ear going, move him away, get away onto something else, regardless of how life-changing and profound it's been.
Yes.
That's not the point.
This
is very against the rules. Don't talk about that.
I only want to see so much of you.
Yes, we don't want to know.
And the rest is not acceptable here.
No, that's right. Your struggles are not relevant here. Thanks very much. Funnily enough, speaking about this medium of the morning shows and that kind of thing, I was watching. Have you seen that footage of Bill O'Reilly where he loses his shit? I was watching that again last night. I hadn't seen it for years. It's just a beautiful moment.
Yeah.
If anyone hasn't seen it, he just goes apeshit. It's like in a break, and he has to say a thing to wrap up the show, and he can't read the teleprompter, and he just goes nuts. And it's my favorite thing that he's ever done because it's honest. Yes, it's you can really see he's got quite a temper, but who knows? Maybe he'd been at that doing that thing for hours and hours on end, and he was just driven to it. But he exploded.
He did. He exploded, and when I think about it now, I think about how he seems so sad at that point. Although he's angry, it feels really sad. It's just like, man, you're like this big shot TV host. You've got the world at your feet, and something little goes wrong, and you just lose your mind. Like, jeepers,
Yeah. He that was a full on tantrum.
Yeah.
It is funny when you see an adult having a tantrum. It's funny when you see a kid having a tantrum. Maybe funny is not the right word, but it's very engaging. It's very. I think if you're in a supermarket or you're out on the street or at a bar or something, and you sense that someone's going to or is just having a tantrum, it's like a train wreck. It's very difficult not to look. It's very engaging, and it's that same thing. It's kind of like you see it, and there's that part of, well, for me anyway, there's that part of me that's like, oh, this isn't for me. I shouldn't be watching this. But then I'm like, well, you're in public, and there's also something And this is kind of a messed up way of looking at it, but there's something beautiful about it because, again, it's honest. It's complete honesty. You would never behave that way intentionally. It's like you are just overcome with feelings, and the feelings are driving the bus, and your conscious mind is not present. You're just reacting and having a tantrum in public.
And I think there's so much to say about that. And I think the first thing I think is what it feels like when someone should be having a tantrum, but they're not having a tantrum, and you can feel that there's something going on that isn't being kind of released, and it's a terrible feeling because you just don't know. What is it? Is it anger? Is it sadness? When the feeling isn't owned, it becomes more powerful. You know, when you own the feeling and you go, oh, that's what's going on with me, you can be with it. But when you're denying it, when you're repressing the feeling, it grows stronger because you're pushing it away and it wants to be known. So it gets the message it needs to be stronger for you to take, make it, to pay attention to it, you know. So children are a lot freer in expression of their emotions because they're not so brainwashed by the social constructs they'll slowly be introduced to through school and parenting and their peers and all sorts of things.
They let it out.
Yeah, in healthy cases they do without being judged.
Yeah, yeah, you're right. Yeah, there is something very beautiful about that honesty of it's just built up and it's got to get there. And I mean, look, as an adult, I guess the key is to try to see the signs that could turn into a tantrum before they get there and communicate with whoever or whatever the situation is so that it doesn't build up to it, because addressing it earlier rather than letting it get to that point where it's coming out and you have no choice. The dragon is given, the dragon is in charge now.
And I guess I would say that sometimes I would be hesitant to call these particular expressions tantrums because of the negative connotation around a tantrum being kind of an excessive use of emotion to gain one's way. But I think a lot of times in adult life when we do have kind of emotional outbursts, whether they're angry or sad, they're really pivotal opportunities for that person to express something that's had found no other way to be voiced. So, you know, we've all had those moments like breakup moments, for example, where it all comes up or it comes out of the other person, and until then you just don't know. But it becomes a fork in the road. It's a really crucial opportunity to go, who is this person or who am I and what does this mean to me? Because a lot of things you won't even know that they're there until they burst forth in some kind of very uncomfortable, unfortunate way, but they've arrived and they need to be dealt with, you know?
Yes.
So
as inappropriate as we may want to deem them, they're real, those feelings.
Well, take Bill O'Reilly, for example. His kind of anger, his display of anger, his outburst, I think you said it was an explosion, was it? Yeah. It's like the producer needs to get this guy some help. He needs somebody to talk to, man, you know? But they're all going, we don't want to disturb the king around here, so we'll just pretend it's all good. But really, it's a cry for help. It's like, Jesus, dude, you're getting upset about this? I think you need somebody to talk to, man. Maybe you need to exercise more or something, or stop eating steak. I don't know. You know what I mean? Like,
totally.
Something's not right here. You know?
Well, I kind of put it down to even being the environment that he was in and has, you know, even beyond that, he played a very provocative, aggressive, alpha interviewer and was constant. I don't know, that was on Inside Edition, that when he lost his shit.
Right,
he went on to becoming, I don't know what Riley Audition or something. But yeah, very aggressive and alpha and constantly kind of grilling people. Either heartily agreeing with them or very intensely disagreeing with them and not letting them speak, really. And that day in, day out, I mean, just that alone, that's got to be unhealthy. That's got to be winding you up. And clearly it was. Amongst many other things that may have been going on in his life, I don't know.
Yeah, it's very, I like how you say kind of alpha, kind of a male kind of thing to to either agree or disagree. You're on my side or you're not on my side. You're good or you're bad. It's just a very primitive kind of way of understanding what's going on around you.
Yeah. Why don't we just backtrack a sec? How, speaking, because we're basically talking of psychology and the mind and why people feel the way they feel. Where are you at with your studies on this stuff?
I'm just heading into my second half of the year studies for graduate diploma in psychotherapy. So yeah, I guess
Nice.
I've been kind of involved in psychotherapy for a while before studying it, and so now studying it's taken it to the next level of trying to understand it more. Yeah, and
Absolutely.
I guess for a lot of people, the difference between what's a psychologist, a counselor, a psychotherapist, a psychiatrist, like what's the difference? They're all like mental health workers, but psychotherapists in particular focus on what they call the talking cure. So having conversations and the kind of the relationship that can form between a therapist and a client, and the potential that has for healing. The literal sense is healing of the soul. That's the origins. Yeah.
Okay. So what specifics does psychotherapy have outside of the other disciplines of this? Like what's the MO of psychotherapy?
Sure. I think the number one is the belief in the unconscious, and that it contributes to the way we consciously live our lives. So in psychology, that doesn't really focus on that, but for psychotherapy, we're trying to explore the unconscious to understand the behaviors, I guess, and what's going on a more conscious level. And so how that's done, there's a whole lot of different ways and theories around it. It's quite a colourful field. It arcs back to Sigmund Freud, who's kind of the original theorist of the whole unconscious.
What was Freud's era?
It was like the early 1900s, like 1890 to 1930. I'm not quite sure on the dates, but yeah.
Was he pre-Jung?
Yes, he Jung studied under Freud. Yeah.
Okay, because you hear, and I haven't studied this stuff, but it's just intriguing to me in general, and anytime you dip your toes into any kind of inward searching, you hear Freud and Jung, but Freud all over the place. So I imagine you've been learning a bit about Freud.
Yeah, he's an interesting guy. He's got a lot of theories, and I guess I would say I'm very much a novice of Freud at this point in stage, because when we study Freud, we're studying the origins, we're studying kind of how we got to where we are today. And so it's super important, but it's a whole world of its own, and I guess where we've come from since then is Freud was a doctor, and so he held that frame with his patients that he was the expert and they were a patient. So he was more there was a kind of a power dynamic there that's been dismantled from Freud's era onwards until we now acknowledge therapy more to be two people co-creating. They're there together, creating something between the two of them, rather than an expert and a sick person.
Okay. Kind of like what we're doing now.
Yeah, that's right. It's relational. Yeah.
Right. So we'll take turns in being the sick person for this conversation.
Well, we're both the sick person, right?
Yeah.
We're just trying to,
scrambling to get out.
Yeah.
Coming back to the unconscious and the control that it has over our consciousness and our behavior, that seems to be a world that we really don't have a whole lot of hard data and hard understanding on. Would you agree?
Yeah, it's I mean by its very definition it's elusive.
Yeah.
It's the unknown, basically. But the more it's tricky. Yeah, it's a really tricky one actually to kind of talk about how do we kind of validate it, or how do we know what we think?
Well, I think that the the hesitancy to answer that question is the answer to the question. We're fumbling around trying to figure it out as a species. You know, our ideas on what our subconscious is and how it affects or is it subconscious or unconscious?
Unconscious is the term I'm using. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. What our unconscious, what control our unconscious has over our behaviors and our feelings. It's really a field that we're kind of having a crack at, you know. It's not like, oh no, it's definitely 7. That's it.
Yeah.
We've got the answer.
That's right. And I think perhaps it's because one of the problems is that we like to know, you know, in the kind of a more scientific era where we can get answers and we can do tests and things. We're also seeing a rise in mental illness. I think World Health Organization thinks depression is going to be the leading cause of disability by 2020. So in this age of knowing and knowledge, when it comes to something that's hard to define and hard to know, we're very skeptical. But at the same time, we're living in a time where the kind of the overarching power of science has perhaps contributed to the fact that there are so many people who aren't adapting well to this society. That knowing is actually part of the problem. And so making room for the things that we don't know and can't necessarily accurately box up and label is actually a really important part of our human experience that we're not developing at the moment.
Wow, yeah. Yeah, that seems to make a lot of sense. You're right. If we can't answer the question, it becomes quite frustrating because there are a lot of questions that we can answer. And I wonder if perhaps as technology improves and we move through advancements in technology and having, for instance, now we all have a device on us at all times that can answer pretty definitively, or at least what we think, most questions. You know, who was the guy in that movie? In the 70s, we'd be like, you either know it or you don't know. And maybe you get it wrong. But now you go, done. It was that guy instantly.
Yeah.
And there's so many things like that. What's the weather going to be? Well, you know, there is very little left up to intuition. And I wonder if perhaps the comfort of getting answers in certain things in our life is making the discomfort of not having answers in other things feel more painful.
And I also think it's the ease of getting the answer. It's just like it's right there, right now, all the time. You can get it right away, anything you want. But why am I not happy? You know, so we've got everything, or a lot of us have access to, you know, a lot of material wealth and pleasures and spoils that only kings could dream of not so long ago. Yet, you know, we're still
literally
miserable,
like,
you know,
living like 200 years ago, like better than kings were.
So we continue to try externally to gratify ourselves and seek the answers outside of ourselves. Technology doesn't necessarily facilitate a deeper relationship with oneself, whereas in therapy, the task would be coming to know oneself at a deeper level through trying to get in touch with the unconscious, trying to get in touch with past memories, trying to get in touch with one's emotions and emotional responses. It's kind of like a mindfulness thing. To really figure out who I am and what I'm here to do and why life feels this way and why I do this and what my dreams mean and, you know, all these sorts of things. These are all within us, you know, these are not things that are externally available to us. So if the whole paradigm is, you know, go out there and seek something from externally, go and establish your identity, your ego in society, get more Facebook likes, be, you know, on Forbes millionaire list or whatever, or even simpler, get a house and get a wife, you know, and then you get there and it's like, I'm still unhappy. Well, yeah, because you're just buying into this kind of external set of 6 steps, you know.
Yeah.
And the real work's a lot harder than that. That stuff's kind of easy, you know.
Yeah.
But getting to know yourself and realizing the things that have happened to you in your life that have contributed to the way you function now can be incredibly painful. So, yeah.
Well, there's this inherent desire for us to not exert ourselves. And I wonder if that comes from just a survival instinct. I remember seeing some documentary and they were talking about it was about weight gain essentially, but they used this analogy of a shark, and if a shark is close to some food here and further away from some food over here, it just instinctively goes to the closer food.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
Why would it expel more energy to go to the other food? And that's a very simple analogy, but I think it's the same kind of thing that exists within us, so that if there's something that
sure,
that, we're trying to dive into that is going to make us change for the better, but it's going to hurt now, the innate desire is to go, nah, I don't want to do that.
Absolutely.
I don't want to do the work.
Yeah.
That which is a tough thing to overcome, but it seems to be, and I guess what I'm asking is, I wonder if that's naturally in everyone, or if that's been kind of strengthened in us because of the way that we live.
Yeah, I mean, I think,
and I'm going to need a definitive answer from you, because we're all over.
Well, let me. I think it's a really interesting point, and I think that our brains are built in like 3 different structures, and there's more of a reptilian brain at the core, so it's likely we do function in some ways like a shark in terms of the closest meal. Why would I exert myself further than the closest meal I can get? But the difference is we've evolved into being kind of meaning making. We need to make meaning from things, and we need to, we create art and music and symbols, and we have a rich inner world. And so that response to just grabbing what is the nearest thing doesn't fulfill that higher functioning that we all have,
Oh, yeah, clearly not.
So it may be a primitive drive, maybe a more kind of basic level of being in the world. I need to eat, I need to sleep, I need to procreate, whatever. But beyond those needs, and I do think it is part of evolution that we are becoming more focused on things that were not even acknowledged, issues that weren't acknowledged in the past, like depression and anxiety, and these being symptoms of the kind of psychic development of the species, so we can move forward and evolve. It's always pain where you're growing.
Absolutely. Yes. It's almost inevitable. It's almost inevitable to have growth without some kind of discomfort or pain. It's perhaps impossible.
And it just appears on a wider level, on at least in the Western world, that the mental health is where this pain is being embodied. That's it's the most kind of, it's so viral, that there's something going on there.
I think with psychotherapy, you obviously, it's not going to be effective unless there's honesty. The whole situation has to begin with honesty, regardless of how much guilt or shame an individual may be feeling. But I feel like in the social media world, there seems to be quite the opposite of that. People are portraying themselves in a way that is really not honest with how they're feeling. People will portray their best version of themselves. And I'm guilty of it. We've all done it. You're going to put something online, and you take 5 photos. You put up the best photo, and you get it right, and you put up the best version. And that's even the most innocent version of it. Then there comes the things where there's the face tune and there's all that stuff, and you actually make yourself appear to be someone more enhanced than you really are. And I think that can probably be perpetuating this situation of when you're back in your actual life and you can't make your face look better than it is, and you can't change the angle of the thing you just said because it's happened and it's real, that can create a bigger gap between what we feel like we're putting out there on social media and what we're actually living.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much to social media. There's so many layers, and I think, of the kind of girls or men with eating disorders and how they have private groups and Instagram accounts, and this is just one example. Self-harm is another one, where the internet actually creates competition for their illness, essentially. So it's even darker kind of perspective. But I think essentially social media is kind of your ego presentation of yourself. So it is just what you want people to see. And so what happens is you end up presenting the part of yourself that you want people to see at the expense of showing the true parts of yourself that you desperately want people to understand. But you can't acknowledge that. Facebook is in a way encourages people to split themselves between who they are and who they want other people to see that they are. And I think that effect is toxic, because what do people put time into? Getting the photos, getting the likes, whatever, rather than putting in time into their own, their fuller self. Like, what are the things that I can work? What if I took all the time I spent on Facebook and Instagram and Snapchat, whatever, and actually put just a quarter of that into working or going to the gym or going to a therapist or just meditating or something like that? Things that no one will ever see, perhaps, but contribute to your health for the people who are around you, not your 1,000 Facebook friends,
Yeah. Did you know that recently they've I don't know if they've done it in New Zealand, but in Australia on Instagram, they've taken the likes thing away. So you can still like a photo, but it doesn't show the tally to everybody how many people liked the photo. So you as a user can see how many people liked your photo, but there's an extra step you've got to do to go in and see that. So I don't know why there wasn't. Yeah,
I think that's a mental health thing's what I've heard.
Yes, I think yes.
I think,
which I mean, that's a healthy step.
I think, but I also question if it's similar to what they did with Facebook when they stopped pages from having the same amount of organic reach, and so you had to then advertise more to reach the same amount of people. I don't know if it's related to that, but I mean, if Instagram or Facebook were interested in mental health, they wouldn't be operating. You're
exactly right. And these are huge commodities. And why would they be making changes? This is a very skeptical way of looking at it, but I feel like it's probably accurate. Why would they be making changes that are more so directed towards the mental health of people and don't have a financial gain element to them? There's got to be something in it for them.
Yeah, and I think time will tell. I guess Facebook is a bit like McDonald's. It's kind of it's a quick fix to a very complicated problem.
Yeah. When was the last time you had McDonald's?
Oh,
good answer.
Look, I'm no saint, mate. I'm no saint, but I tell you what, I have recently actually. I just started doing this thing called the Kai Box, which is a New Zealand plant-based kind of meal provider. So
cool.
You order, you order from them, and they send you all the ingredients and recipes for 4 meals. That are
so you make the meal, but they give you the. Oh, nice.
That's right. Yeah, you make the meal, but they give you all the ingredients. And
how you enjoying it?
Oh, I've actually only had 1 box so far, and I'm just over the moon about it.
Cool.
Because I guess I'm interested in the whole plant-based thing, but I don't have enough recipes, and this just makes it easy because the meals are really well flavored and they're filling and they're healthy, and I don't have to go out and buy the ingredients and work out the meals or anything. So it's a really interesting way of eating. Quite off topic from the unconscious, but still based.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I've been doing the plant-based thing for I think it's nearly 5 or 6 years now, maybe a bit more. And I agree with you that when you first, because I used to eat a lot of meat. I used to eat a whole chicken a day. I'd get a barbecue chicken. I'd have half of it for lunch, and I'd have the other half for dinner, and that would be the food I would eat pretty much. So going from basing everything around meat and having other stuff to fill the plate, and then taking out the main thing and going, all right, what do I do now? It can be quite a tricky thing. So
Absolutely.
that for me was the hardest thing when Laurel and I did it, because I was lucky we did it together, and it's easy when you got a buddy to do it with. But being able to figure out what you're going to eat and enjoy it, that's a challenge. So anything that helps that, dude, is fantastic.
Yeah. So I guess it's a comment on, we do have technologies like Facebook and Instagram, but we also have kind of new businesses that are, I don't know, are they taking advantage of technologies? Not really. There's some good progress and some not so good progress.
Yeah.
Put it that way.
Yeah. So I was going to ask you, how old were you when you started having these kind of existential thoughts? Has this been something? I mean, for as long as I've known you, there's always been this. And you hit it very well when I first met you, but I knew it was in there.
Love it.
But yeah, this underlying kind of what is the Matrix thing,
I love it. I watched that movie last night. Absolutely.
Did you? I'm in the middle of watching it again too.
Incredible piece of work. Yeah.
Isn't it amazing?
It's absolutely
just fascinating.
Yeah.
A masterpiece.
I mean, Matrix is a great movie to talk about the idea of the conscious and the unconscious, because the Matrix itself is like the conscious world. It's what we know. It's I'm talking about the program world. I think that's what they call the Matrix, right? Is that the?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so that's the conscious self, and then it's programmed. It runs to its orders, and then the unconscious being the underworld, where you have these rebellious kind of urges, these rebels who are breaking forth into the conscious world and causing, they're disrupting the order, which is kind of how the unconscious and conscious relates to one another. It's no one wants to be depressed. No one wants to have, sexual urges or whatever, but they come from somewhere, these rebellious things, and we try to get rid of them instead of understanding what they are. And you just imagine if in the Matrix, in the conscious world, they understood what these rebels were trying to achieve, how that would transform everyone's human experience.
Absolutely. Yes, such a visionary movie.
That
story.
Is, yeah.
Like, I've watched it so many times now, and it's just brilliant.
It is, It's really, really profound, actually, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. So how old do you remember being when you started to kind of see how deep the rabbit hole goes?
Yeah, it's a great question. I don't think I've ever had to answer that before, so I'm not quite sure. I really
do you think it's something that's always been with you? This kind of curiosity of what a deeper meaning in life, and what's the purpose of being alive, and that kind of thing. I guess the reason I ask,
keep going.
Well, I was going to say, I guess the reason I ask is because I remember I have a memory of me lying in bed looking at the ceiling, and I think I'd just woken up from a dream, and I was thinking, or either that or I was about to go into a dream, so I was in a different conscious state, and just thinking about the planets and the stars, and thinking about what happens after I die, and getting myself full of existential dread because I was thinking there's not really any point to it. And it wasn't essentially a nihilistic thought, but it was just a thought about nobody's telling me anything about this.
Sure. Yeah.
And I think that if I can picture what was around me in my bedroom, it was my young childhood bedroom. So I was probably about 6. Because I can see the curtains next to me, and the curtains have got like a rainbow and a tractor or something on them. And I don't have those curtains anymore. I just threw them out a week ago.
But what a moment, though.
Yeah.
What a moment.
And it's quite vivid, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, so I guess what I'm asking is do you have anything similar?
There's nothing I can pinpoint precisely. I think I've always been interested in. I guess I've always been quite introspective, so spending a lot of time thinking about things, but also connected to like empathetic. So I'm interested in how other people kind of work, and I've been like that. I was born a twin, so I had a twin sister, and I think that was part of kind of being involved in being I don't know how you put it, not necessarily being the center of things, but having to be someone between things. This sense of being in between is something I can relate to, and I think it probably comes from that space somewhat.
Wow, I always forget that you're a twin. That's a fascinating phenomenon in itself. Yeah, okay. So it's just kind of been with you.
Well, I would have to think about it more, I guess, to really feel like I was giving you it's something for me to think about, I suppose. Yeah.
It's not really that important. It's just curious.
Well, I think it can be profoundly important, that moment of realizing how vulnerable you are in this world and how little you know. And
yes,
it's terrifying, you know.
It really is, especially when it's framed that we do know, that we do have all the answers, and as a kid you're yet to learn them, but you will as you get older. I'll tell you when you're older, you know, that kind of, you'll get it, but you're not ready yet, but you'll get them all, and then you become an adult and you go, still haven't got them all. When am I going to get all the answers? Yeah. I was sure I was going to get them when I was a kid, but no, still waiting.
And I think there's another layer as well, which is when we're infants and young children, we're usually treated in a we're the center of our own universes, essentially. So we come to know what it is to be loved in whatever way we are loved. And for the rest of our lives, we're kind of searching for that same level of care and attention, whether it's dysfunctional or not. And I think the answers to the questions are irrelevant as if one feels loved, you know. But the problem is being loved from other people is a bit of a treacherous path, whereas, you know, fostering a sense of compassion and care for oneself is more supportive. Ultimately, through those existential crises, there can be a holding of oneself that it doesn't make it seem as bad as it could if you just felt alone, you know.
Yeah, well, a lot of good stuff in that one.
What's good in it for you? What comes up for you?
Well, yeah, I guess just trying to understand where, if we are being raised in the most optimal manner, you know, and whether, I always have this thought that what is nature and how much is nature and how much is nurture? And it's a very difficult question to answer. And again, you know, trying to find the answers to things is probably not the healthiest way to constantly be focusing on things. But it is a question that...
Such an important question, though.
Yeah, it does intrigue me a lot. And I often think about how, are we in certain frames of mind as an adult because of what's happened to us as a child, or regardless of what's happened to us as a child? And how do people feel about themselves and about the world when they are raised in a completely different manner, for instance, in a tribal manner? And I always question when people say, you know, that's just human nature. You know, he's doing that because it's human nature, or she's like that because it's just in her nature. I guess I've always thought, well, that's a hard one to know whether that's true, because there's no way for her or him to grow up in a different manner. They're done. They've grown up. They're growing up, you know. So I guess there's probably some studies on tribal people and how they
well,
they
I mean, you
adults.
are a tribal person as well, you know.
Yes,
let's not forget
yes, that's
where
true.
you come from too. But one thing you might want to look up is epigenetics, which is about how different genes are activated depending on our experiences. So
I just heard, is it Bruce Lipton who was talking about that?
I'm not sure who it is, but I think there's a couple of neuroscientists and psychologists who, it's a really kind of becoming field at the moment, but it kind of combines what you're talking about in terms of my genetic material, my ancestry, and also my experiences. So how, for example, being abused as a child could activate the depression gene and play out later in life. I mean, yeah, for me personally, I think you can't separate nature versus nurture. The two interact together, which makes for quite a complicated drama. But I do think what has happened to us in our histories really is still with us in this moment. So in a sense, our past still plays out right in our present as well. Because if trying to think of some examples, but I guess we see it a lot in the hero's journey in movies, and if you look at any stories of famous people, there's usually something in the childhood that contributes to where they go later on in life. And we kind of watch movies and read stories like that without having to acknowledge the fact that, actually what happened to me in childhood has also affected the way my life has turned out as well. But there seems to be a little bit of just general understanding that the events that happen to us in our lives affect the way that how we develop and grow.
Yes, you're dead right. It is very difficult to separate those two things, the nature and the nurture, because they go hand in hand. I often wonder too about how can a certain series of events affect one individual and how differently those similar kind of events may affect another. One incident, a small incident of schoolyard bullying may completely break a person, and then 90% of other people may be completely fine or may even become stronger from it. But it's the same thing, and that again is all so personal to that individual circumstances and whatever it is that's happened to them and makes their brain or their mind, should I say, work the way it works. Certain things can be far more triggering for those individuals than a lot of other people.
Sure, yeah, different levels of sensitivity, just differences in character, and one of the fascinating things I find is kind of the gender differences. And when teaching young boys, because I teach some at a primary school, I teach some guitar there, and you kind of see how maybe a boy is 8 years old or 7 years old and his favorite color is pink. And I'd kind of be like, oh, that's interesting. And then, by 9 or 10, there's no way that their favorite color is pink. And so when you're talking about how are we bringing up children, how could we be doing it better? I think there's no doubt that we've still got a lot of work to do. You just look at the school system and the way that it kind of, kids who are too energetic are labeled, ADHD.
Yes.
It's just
there's something wrong with them.
Yeah, well, you imagine being a kid who's now being diagnosed, you're ADHD, maybe you're on some medications. You go to school, you act out, you're just being you get told off, the kids don't want to be your friend anymore because you're ADHD, so they like call you names and that. You're outcast, man. That's going to cause a secondary issue for this child of being like, I've never belonged. They're going to grow up never belonging. For example.
Yeah. I mean, I kind of have this thought about the danger of a diagnosis. Once you're slapped with that diagnosis, it's official. You've got this. And it's almost like it's twofold because, we know the power of a placebo and how effective that can be. If you know something is true, whether it's true or not, you can 30% of the time it will happen just because you, in inverted commas, know it's going to happen. But then also it can become like a bit of something you can lean on, I've got ADHD, so it's not my fault. Whether, and again, you may not, that poor kid may not even have that. He's just pumped. He's just got too much energy. They just need to go and run around. But
ideally they need a school system that can actually cater to individuals, rather than the kind of the generalized horde, And that's what I love about teaching music one-on-one, is that you get to meet the individual where they are. And I think it's the same for therapy too. It's not in a group.
Yeah.
But the diagnostic thing is more the medical. It's the Western medical model of kind of pharmaceuticals and going, this is what you have and this is what you need for it. that's how the business kind of works.
Here are the products that we have for this particular diagnosis.
Yeah, and I think that's quite challenging for people who are really struggling with challenges in life, because it's saying the cure is outside of you. You need to take this and put this inside your broken self to be fixed again. Whereas,
the truth, when you really think about it, sorry to cut you off.
Right.
How many times do we know of a pill or a medicine, like a physical medicine, that will cure an illness? I mean, unless it's an acute infection, like penicillin, okay, great, very effective. But beyond that, there's not really any that I can think of.
Yeah, I know what you're saying.
But yet that's kind of the way that we attack it, is that you need to put this in you. Or also, it just happens that you have to do it forever as long as you're alive. You have to continue putting this in you. It's not going to fix the problem. It's just going to squish the symptoms.
That's right, yeah. It's disempowering.
It is.
And it's just narrow. So it's just, even if it's a medical condition, it doesn't seem to, 15 minutes with a doctor. I mean, if you went into a doctor, I know here in New Zealand, you go into a doctor and say, I can't sleep, I'm feeling really down. It's been like this for weeks. They're just going to prescribe you some antidepressants. And, these days they might offer you or suggest for you to go to therapy or whatever. But that's kind of like, it's a very shallow response to a much deeper problem, at least in my perspective.
I agree. I think it, as you kind of alluded to before, it seems, when you can really step back from it, it seems more about pushing pharmaceuticals and products than fixing the problem, because it doesn't fix the problem.
And I think this is one of the issues, is that the fixing of problems, especially when they're mental, is a difficult and lengthy process, and so it costs money, and people don't want difficult and lengthy solutions. They want,
Well, and also, as what we were talking about before, with the one kid who gets bullied in school, gets emotionally broken, and all the other kids are fine, that points out that it doesn't work like that. Like you can't, you have to meet them one-on-one, because treating this one kid, talking to this one kid and figuring out what affected them is not going to be the same as the other kid, whereas you give all the kids the pills as if it's just going to work with all of them.
Yes, that's right. And I think also, I think so often it appears to me that, in childhood, we're kind of robbed of our individuality. To survive, we have to repress it and adapt to the norms of the family or the social environment, the school, whatever. And then in adulthood, we're left searching to get back in touch with it again.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Or we have a midlife crisis.
Well, I mean, yeah, that's the beginning of the search of where have I lost myself, and I think so often it does go back into childhood where the losing begins, because
you can find it in a sports car or a boat.
That's your first stop before you have to admit to yourself, actually, I need to do some work.
Yeah, I looked everywhere in the boat, and it's not in there.
Affairs as well, sexual affairs, sexual relationships. There's a whole lot of appealing options.
Yeah. I have an idea. I was talking about this with my folks the other day about teaching and the schooling system. And I was and I don't know if this has already been put into place somewhere. I know that I think it's in Switzerland. I know in Scandinavia they've got some more progressive and alternative educational methods.
Sure.
But I was thinking about a schooling method where the first couple of weeks is just analyzing how each child learns,
right?
Because we all have different learning methods. So instead of all being thrown into the same learning method, we actually figure out how each kid learns. Like I, for instance, I didn't do too great at school,
right?
But because I just couldn't retain the information, and I found it's because I'm a creative person, and I'm also a listening person, and I think I need to be a bit more hands-on. Whereas when it comes to just writing things down, it just doesn't work for me, but yet there'd be other kids who they just nail it, and they're the kids who get awarded the A's and are the smartest kids and the best kids, you know. And it's hard not to compare yourself to those other kids because you're not as smart as them. But is that the truth, or is it because you're not being taught in a way that works for your mind? So what we're going to do is you and I are going to put in all our money. I've roped you into this, right? And we're going to create a brand new schooling system.
Yeah, I think it will be called homeschooling.
Yeah. That's probably
you get the parents involved. Yeah, I mean, I agree, man. I think that's a great example of how focused the curriculum is on, I guess, reading and writing skills. And I've been thinking lately, some of the lectures I go to, I've been thinking about, they're 3 hours long, and the person just stands there talking for 3 hours, and I'm like, is this really how education? I get disengaged, like it's fascinating stuff, but it's like I want to hold something, or I want it to be more real.
Yeah.
And so I wonder also if that's typically more of a male thing or a masculine thing to want to be more hands-on with learning.
Well, I think that's. I agree with you, and I think there's a lot of evidence to show that that is the case. And I, in this fantasy system that I'm creating, you would do a little bit of assessment on each child and figure out what their strengths are, what their weaknesses are, how they retain things, and then you can group them together. So, for instance, you can have a class of the listening learners. You can have a class of the so-called ADD kids, and they pretty much spend most of their lessons outside. You have a class of the bookworm kids, head down, writing, that kind of thing. And so then at least you can have a teacher that is of the same mindset. So they don't have to do as much adapting because they already know they're going on the way they naturally learn, teaching these kids the way these kids naturally learn, at least in a closer manner.
Yeah, and I think teachers, at the moment, probably always, but definitely at the moment, have a hell of a job on their hands.
Oh, well, they get paid next to nothing as it is.
Yeah.
So it's rough. Yeah,
and just the level of responsibility. You've got the parents, you've got your boss, the principal, you've got the children as well. You've got so many conflicting inputs, and I think a lot about why there aren't more male primary school teachers. Because how can we engage males to learn at that level?
Yeah, that's an interesting question.
Personally, I think it's because most of the time we suspect if a male is interested in children, then he must have some kind of sexual urges towards kids, or we have this kind of a pedophile kind of suspicion of men. Yeah. I don't know what it's like in Australia, but I sense that is something here in New Zealand.
I mean, I know what you're talking about. Yes, definitely. People, and it's really sad that is. Well, I mean, we don't even have to talk about how sad pedophilia is, but it's sad that I think males are afraid to get too close to children in a nurturing manner for fear of being labelled as a pedophile.
And I think it extends to fathers being fathers to their sons, to boys, to bring boys into manhood. That attitude of not being totally enthusiastic or knowing how to engage in a healthy relationship with your child or younger adult,
Yeah, totally. Coming back to what you're talking about before with the unconscious and how it affects us, I had a very weird, well, all dreams are weird, but I had quite an odd dream last night, and I thought that I would talk to you about dream analysis because I know you've done a little bit of work on this dream analysis stuff.
Yeah, I'm a big into dreams.
Yeah, cool. Me too. So, do you know what it means when there's snakes in your dream?
I love this. This is the
get
classic.
Your cards out.
This is the classic. Let me get the dream icon dictionary now. Snakes in a dream, you're going to die in 24 days. Okay.
Okay, good. Right.
All right. That'll be $100.
That's what I thought it was.
Thank you.
Excellent. You played that out perfectly.
Tell me more about the dream. If you want to talk about the dream, you'll have to tell me more about it.
Okay, sure. So I was outside somewhere. Our friend Jimmy was there.
Mm-hmm.
My wife Laurel was there, and our two little dogs were there. And then I noticed that there are all these snakes around, and went, oh dear, I hope the dogs don't get bitten by a snake. And then the next thing I knew, both of the dogs were wrapped up in snakes, and the snakes were trying to swallow the dogs. So I yelled, we need to stop this. So I need like a shovel or something so I can kill the snakes. Because as a child, I grew up on a farm and we had 100 acres, and I've killed snakes before.
Okay.
And so I think Jimmy got me an axe, and I chopped the heads off these snakes, and was then having to pull the dogs out of the snakes' mouths. And then I woke up. So, pretty standard stuff.
So where were you? You're outside?
I was outside somewhere. I don't know. It wasn't a familiar place.
But this whole thing of killing snakes is familiar to your childhood in a way.
Yes, I have done it in real life.
Yeah. And when you did it in real life, were there ever two snakes or dogs involved?
Yes, there was a dog involved. There was never two snakes, but I killed a snake because my dog was very, very close to it. But the other thing that I remember was I wasn't too fussed. Like I wasn't terrified.
In the dream or in real life?
In the dream. In the dream I was obviously stressed out, but I was in action mode.
Yeah.
And then when I woke up thinking, wow, I was like, that was a crazy dream. And then I played it out again in my mind. I was thinking, wow, that's actually quite disturbing. And I was surprised how I wasn't that disturbed by it. I'm disturbed now that I talk about it. But I guess in the scenario, the dream adrenaline had kicked in.
So the snakes are big.
They were big, and the dogs were smaller than they actually are. I guess.
What was Laurel doing while you were involved with the snakes?
She was near me, but she was letting me take care of it.
And Jimmy was getting you an axe?
He was around too, and he was letting me take care of it as well.
What do you think the snakes could represent?
Well, I have been on a bit of a path recently of exercising self-discipline, and kind of what we talked about earlier about taking control of doing things that I feel like I don't want to do, little disciplinary things that I would rather avoid. So perhaps it's addressing things that scare me because, not that I'm overly terrified of snakes any more than the next person, but, they're certainly frightening enough.
It's stressful work. And it's unknown what's going to happen. I wonder if in your dream, if the dogs are the more kind of symbols of the more kind of instinctual drives that you have, they get in trouble with these snakes. Of course they do, these dogs, they're mischief. And then you have to kind of rescue them from the jaws of these snakes, pull them out. You're having to exert this willpower to prevent them from being destroyed.
Yeah. And it is a lot of willpower, I guess, because you've got to put yourself in a situation of danger for yourself.
That's right. And or at least it feels that way, right? It's like it may historically have been dangerous, like to put yourself in these new situations and change your behavior. And so it feels very real, but the dream would indicate that actually you did save the dogs. You do get out all right.
Yeah.
You know?
But it's the
but
action.
It's also independence as well, because you don't really have anybody else directly helping you. You're given the axe, correct, but you're not helped, really. You're in this one alone. You're on a journey.
Well, that's actually something that I learned from my last psychedelic experience. Was it basically told me, stop coming here. It was basically like, you have work to do on your own. I'm not going to give you the answers anymore.
Yeah.
And that was years ago, a few years ago now, but that's something that, these things can take a very long time to integrate. So that's
absolutely
that kind of growing up and becoming the man that I'm supposed to be has been a bit of a theme for me recently. So perhaps it's on that same path.
Well, I mean,
taking action. Yeah.
Well, you certainly are in the dream, and heroic in a sense, because you're saving the dogs,
Yeah. How do you feel about dreams?
All sorts of things.
Yeah. Do you think that we are entering a place or a place of existence that is always there and we just come in and out? Or do you think it's just a pattern of our consciousness?
I think that's a fascinating question, and I really can't answer it. I don't know.
Right.
But I guess what I think dreams are the only way we really have of connecting directly to our unconscious, and then having a way of delivering to us from inside wisdom or knowledge that we need. Dreams are, for many psychotherapists and some counselors too, or dream workers, they're crucial tools for the therapeutic work, because you can't really get a better source of information than a dream of what's going on within someone. And that's where I stand on it at this stage anyway. Some dreams can be extremely powerful. The symbols and the what they point to that's happening within the individual. To me, dreams can mean a lot.
Well, I think that's another a really great example of what we were talking about before with the unexplored unconscious and us not really having a whole lot of answers about what's going on. I mean, dreams couldn't be any more psychedelic. They, and yet everybody experiences them every single time they go to sleep. Whether they remember them or not, it's truly a fascinating thing that we just, because it happens all the time and there's not really any mainstream answers or studies of these things, it's just like you just kind of fob it off. Oh, well, yeah, had a weird dream.
Yeah,
and go about your day.
And there's some interesting stuff around like alpha waves and beta waves and the brain waves in different stages of sleep and how they relate to when we're dreaming. And so our brain is actually more active in that state of sleep than it is when we're awake, which points to something kind of interesting. But dreams have been a thread of our history. I mean, in the Bible, the story of Joseph and his dreams, his ability to interpret dreams changed his whole life. In Egypt, there's the first dream or something. Has been written out on the stones there. So.
Yeah, it's big in Aboriginal culture as well. They have the dream time and they have a very close relationship with the dreams.
Yeah, and I think it's a real sign of our age that we would be so disrespectful to something that comes from within us to criticize it and to put it aside as if it's some new world, not new world, a new age kind of flip-flop. I mean, these are important communications that should be held like any other thing we do creatively, with respect. That's what I believe anyway.
I agree with you, man. There's got to be so much in there that we are yet to discover and yet to understand. And it's just staring us in the face every single night, Did you ever get into the lucid dreaming?
I did a little bit, but I never could. I never really got there, basically.
Right.
I got the ones where I'd be falling asleep. I can't remember what you call that stage, but
the hypnagogic phase.
Kind of in that I could move into control from there. But I actually ended up doing so much work on my dreams that being lucid scares me a bit because I want it to be unconscious,
Right.
I want it for me not to be in control. So no, I don't know much I don't have much personal experience in old lucid.
Yeah, I mean, I'm probably only a couple of steps further along in the lucid thing than you. I got lucid a few times. It's quite a taxing practice. You have to do it. You have to write down your dreams every day. You got to do reality checks to make sure you're not dreaming when you're awake. And then when you do the reality check when you are dreaming, you realize, oh shit, I'm actually dreaming. I've got 6 fingers. And then you become present in the dream. But you stay in the dream, but you get so excited that you usually come out of the dream. And so I got there a couple of times and I was able to explore around, but it's something that I didn't stick with applying myself to it. But It does intrigue me, and it also does terrify me.
Mm.
I do agree with what you say, how it's frightening to be able to meddle with that stuff in there. I think maybe the benefit of lucid, or becoming strengthening a lucid dream practice would come from being able to get lucid but remain a passenger. So like, rather than changing what you're doing, because there were a few times when I became lucid, I was like, oh, I'm dreaming. And I stopped what was happening in the dream and I went and did something else. Whereas instead of doing that, perhaps just watching from a more conscious place and letting it play out. But instead of, it would be bringing the mind that you analyze the dream in when you're awake into the dream, so that you are still doing what's happening, but it's like you don't have to remember it when you're awake. You can already be present when it is happening.
Yeah, and I think it provides some opportunities to actually speak to the symbols in the dream. So if you were lucid in the dream with the dogs and the snakes, you could go to the snakes and say, what do you represent? And see what they said back, you know.
Yeah,
Which you can also do in conscious waking life, in a kind of a psychodrama of it. You can, you know, focus in on the symbol or the character and talk to them and find out what they have. God, that sounds a bit crazy, doesn't it? But it's something that does happen in you know,
it's great.
psychotherapy.
I love it.
You'd be surprised what can come from that.
Yeah. All right, look, let's jump into the real world. I'd love to talk to you about your world travels.
Oh yeah, sure, yeah.
You're a nutter, bro. You've gone to some places on your own,
Yeah,
that most people would never dream of going.
mm.
Where did you go to? Was it Nepal, Tibet?
Yeah, Nepal. Yeah, it's been a couple
Nepal.
of months in Nepal, doing a couple of
Just a
tricks.
couple of months. And so, firstly, so much respect to you for doing this. It blows my mind. And you did it solo, and you went for months, not only to a country where there's probably not a lot of English speaking.
It's not bad.
Right.
Yeah.
But you went on these like solo treks where there's no, like, you use a map to get from where you're going. Right?
Yeah,
you caveman.
Yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it? I don't
Firstly,
know what I was doing.
I was going to say, what was it that compelled you to do this?
Great question. Hard to know the answer.
Yeah, maybe that's an unanswerable question. It was just in you. It was like, I have to do this.
Well, I think at the time I was working in corporate media and I hated my job, and so every weekend I would go and go on outdoor trips, and I loved that.
Right.
And you know, I was on this kind of conveyor belt up through the company, and you know, earning good money, and everything was kind of looking good. Apart from inside, I was like, God, there's got to be more to life than this. So that's what I did. I bought a one-way ticket and flew out to Nepal, and I thought I could take my kind of weekend adventuring to the next limit.
What drew you to Nepal, of all places?
Yeah, again, it's hard to pinpoint exactly what it was. It just kept coming up, and there was something just so beautiful about the images I could see of the hikes. So I guess at first it was it's wilderness, its beauty, the Himalayas, and the stories of great adventurers that have been through that area, and just the culture. Everything was just so different, so foreign.
Cool.
It was
Cool. It was calling.
It was calling, and it wouldn't let up. And unfortunately, my life is full of those things where things just keep calling, and it has to happen. So that was one of them.
Right, so you went to Nepal on your own.
Yeah.
Epic.
And it is like, it was, I mean, it was a big life-changing experience, I guess. It took me a long time to get to grips with it, from just, I don't know. It was, I went there for the adventure, but what I got out of it was actually the people there and the learnings of kind of the wisdom in these very poor people and the warmth from them. And it was something that I felt was just devastatingly lacking from our Western culture,
Right.
Like, these guys are like, there's a lot of, it's very poor country, but they're so warm and welcoming. It's hard to get your head around. And then, in the more kind of built up areas outside of the, mountain ranges and that, you're just looking at like stray dogs running around and polluted rivers and like rubbish being burnt on the side of the streets. You can be traveling through that for hours, and it's just like, oh, someone told me the world's going to end one day. I'm like, the world has ended. It's here.
Wow.
Like, what the fuck? It's just like,
wow. So far removed from our Western
that's
comforts.
right. Yeah, it's just really just have no idea what other people are going through or what standards they're living in. And there's worse than that happening. In other places in the world.
Yeah, yeah.
But it's moving. It was moving for me anyway to see that and to really meet that and go, wow, I see what they mean when they say we've got it good. But at the same time, I also see that we're missing something they have too. And I've often thought if the two worlds, the Western and the Eastern, kind of could come together and have some exchange, perhaps we could reach a healthier place,
Yeah. Well, I predict that we're going to be forced to.
In
a point where things are just going to where things are physically going to get so bad in the East and things are emotionally going to get so bad in the West that it's just going to be, we're going to be forced to change or die out.
And I think it's already happening in that there's a lot of awareness, and there's kids who are like 16 years old doing protests for the environment and stuff, and it's like, they have social media, but on their accounts, they're not putting like golfer on it or whatever. They're like, I'm an activist. It's like, wow. These kids have been born into anxiety because of the situation they've inherited, and they're not happy about it.
No, they don't really. They kind of have to. Like people, human beings have to fix these problems. Because it's just going to go real bad. It's like it's going to be at a point where it's going to be apocalyptic, and like these movies that they when they portray this stuff, it's going to happen if we don't do something, it will happen, and then we'll do something to come out of it.
Well, I mean, I'm amazed on Netflix on the homepage how many movies that prop up that are about apocalyptic scenarios. Yes. There's a collective anxiety at the moment around the world coming to an end. It's really there, and I wonder what that means. And often I guess I think it's not about our the world coming to an end or our lives coming to an end, but our way of being in the world dying.
You're exactly right. I mean, the Earth will be fine. It's human civilization coming to an end.
We've had a good time the last 100 years, completely trashed the place. It's been a hell of a party. But,
absolutely, yeah.
It's time to face the hangover.
I had a great time back in the 20s,
Yeah.
The 1600s is where I really thrived, bro. Yeah. So you came back from those world travels a genuinely different person. You're a great testament to the old saying of travel broadens the mind and the heart.
Well, I haven't really thought of that too much myself, but I guess it was a pretty full-on experience for me. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it would be for anyone, dude. Didn't you nearly die at one point?
Probably a few points, to be
Yeah, well, one that you know of, but others that you may not have even been aware of.
There's been some I've done some things. A lot of it was, I guess, about connection with nature as well. It's about connecting with the outdoor environment, and something really special about that. And I think it's become a really big thing as well. Like a lot of Instagram is about beautiful outdoor locations. This kind of irony. But I'm not really answering your question here, am I? I'm kind of getting.
You don't have to go into the story if you don't want to.
What were you looking for? Did you?
No, I was just asking about how the time you nearly died.
Oh, yeah.
We don't have to talk about it.
Was that the high altitude one? Is that the?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, oh man, I'm such a Kiwi, eh? Like, just,
In case you couldn't already tell,
yeah.
you are a Kiwi, yes.
Yeah. Well, look, I just thought we could speed up the itinerary a little bit and skip a few stops. So we did a 1,200 meter, ascent in a day, and I thought we would be fine because we'd been at 3,800 meters earlier in the week, so we should be acclimatized. We get to this little village thing, these houses like aluminium, made out of just aluminium walls, man. Fuck, it was -4 degrees, and it's New Year's Eve, and there's and I go to eat something in this little dining room area thing, and I'm just man, I'm not feeling too good. I'm going to go to sleep. So I leave and I go back into the room, and I'm yeah, I'm just getting real cold, and I can't put on any clothes or anything. I'm just losing muscle control. And so my girlfriend, who I was with at the time, comes into the room an hour later, and I'm just fucking freezing up. And
right, so that's right. She came and met you.
Yeah.
Midway through this trip.
Yeah. And so that was lucky. But yeah, it just spent the next 2 days just really sick, and we were really close to the point. We're 10 days in, and we were 1 day off the key kind of vista, and so I was really holding on that this sickness would pass, that it wasn't a big deal, and then it was just fuck, nah, this is just bad. I'm diarrhea all the time. I couldn't hold. Oh,
because I was going to ask, what are the symptoms of altitude sickness? Like physical sickness, vomiting and diarrhea.
I don't think they list diarrhea as one. I think that was a secondary issue that I had at the time. So that was weakening, me. And it was man, it was terrible. But it's nausea, headaches, just weakness.
Did you feel was there almost some psychosis involved?
Yeah, good question. I had a dream. I had a lot of dreams, actually, because I kept falling asleep all the time, and I was dreaming a lot. And I got to that point where I was man, my dreams are so much better than my life. Wow. It was just I just want to stay there.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, so yeah, ended up getting down, but yeah, it was. It was. You just don't know with that thing when it's going to when you just pass out and get a bleed out or whatever. You know what I mean? With altitude sickness, it doesn't show you exactly when it's going to take you or whatever.
Wow, man. Yeah, wow, that's a real tale.
Yeah. So I should have been more careful in hindsight, but
well, you probably will be in the future.
Yeah, well, I haven't done anything too crazy lately. I mean, now I explore the psyche instead of the outside world, because what happened is I figured out I would end up spending the rest of my life traveling to keep that buzz going, because the places out there are amazing, the beauty and the stillness, the wild. It's super beautiful, but you just can't really do that for your whole life. Well, I didn't feel there were other things I wanted in my life as well as that. Yep. And so I thought, what can I do? Well, I guess doing therapy is similar. You just sit down where you travel into somebody's mind,
Yep, can probably be equally as treacherous and frightening, equally as rewarding.
I'm sure. Yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah. Mm. Well, shall we wrap it up, mate?
Yeah, sure. How do we do that?
Well, I guess we're doing it. I guess I say, shall we wrap it up? And you go, yeah. And then
I go, no, we'll keep the tape rolling, mate. We're just getting started here.
Just getting into the good stuff.
Yeah.
Thanks for chatting with me, bro.
Oh, you're welcome. It's been a pleasure.
We'll do another one in person when we're in person next. Yeah,
hopefully this I don't know if we're talking on tape or off tape now. So do we talk, do I pretend that we're still in the podcast now?
Well, you can. See, that's the beauty of I'm in a great position now because I'm in control, and you're never going to know.
Yes,
I'm going to edit you to say all kinds of horrible things and
ruin my budding professional career.
Yeah. All right, mate. Cheers.
Yeah, you're welcome.
All right. Well, that was quite the chat. I told you, he's a deep guy. He's got a lot to say, and he's He's a real thinker, Olly, so I look forward to having him back on the show sometime in the future. Just a little summary. If you don't know the bit what we were talking about with Bill O'Reilly on, having a tantrum, just YouTube Bill O'Reilly will do it live. Brilliant. Sad, but brilliant. It was good to figure out from Olly what psychotherapy means and how it's different from the other psychiatric disciplines, and how psychotherapy really focuses on the power of the unconscious. It's just proven even more how much of a mystery the unconscious mind is. If you haven't seen The Matrix recently, go check it out. The first one, that is. It's 20 years old now. I think I got even more from it watching it now that I'm 33. I've rewatched it many times, but it keeps revealing brilliant things. So go back and check it out. It was fun to chat about that with Olly, and also kind of serendipitous that he just rewatched it the night before as well. Trying to unpack nature and nurture with Olly that was an interesting part of the chat, how we really can't separate the two because you don't get a do-over, was basically the conclusion we came to. We managed to completely perfect the education system. So if you can shed any light on education systems similar to the one that Olly and I speculated upon in the podcast, please share it with me. I'd be very, very intrigued. I know they're doing some interesting stuff in Scandinavia and that part of the world, so maybe someone can shed some light on that for me. It was very kind of Olly to humour me as I told him one of my dreams. Turns out that interpreting dreams really is a personal endeavour, and he didn't really tell me anything. He just kind of facilitated my own thinking, which was very helpful. So perhaps just sitting down with your own dreams is a far more healthy exercise than trying to get interpretation from somebody else. So well done, Olly. Thanks for helping me figure out my own dream. Also, one other thing we learned, if you are climbing a mountain, don't climb too fast because you might get altitude sickness and poo your pants. So we can all learn from Olly's mistake. Thanks for listening. Love you guys. Talk soon.